Hey everybody, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Matt. I'm going to be the host for today. If this is your first time, our Lunch and Learns are hosted Monday through Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So feel free to hop on any day. This is a place where you can come in and ask any decisions, questions, and we will do our best to respond to those questions and get you an answer. If you do have a question, you can use the Zoom raise hand feature and we can unmute you. Or you could type out your question in the question and answer feature in Zoom. Or of course, you could just type it into the chat box as well. Okay, looks like we've got a hand raised. David, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute, please do so and you can ask your question.
Yeah, I was looking for this earlier today to try to manipulate a string. Do you know of, or do you guys have a step to reverse a string?
Ooh, I like that question. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, so I'm going to open up a flow and I'm going to have a look where I would think that step would be.
Yeah, I went into data to text and looked at a bunch of the string steps. I didn't see it in there. I didn't know if it would be hiding somewhere else.
That's exactly where I would expect it to be. So if it wasn't there, there may be a couple of ways to do this. Are you just trying to have a step that takes in a string and then returns that exact string, but like you said, in reverse?
Yeah, so I have basically what I have is a string that has basically three elements in it that are separated by a space dash space. And so what I want to do is basically turn that string around and then remove everything to the right and then turn it back around, right? So I don't know if that's the best way to do that. Like I saw there is a step in there to remove string either before or after instance, but I may not always know what, like the instance of that may not always be consistent, right? Because in my other element, I may have that character. So I was just trying to experiment with reversing it and trying it that way. And I didn't see a step, but as a way around it, I just threw a raw SQL step in there and did a select reverse on my thing and then output that as a data row and then took the I guess the string value of that first cell, because I always know I'm always going to get one result from that.
Yeah, okay, that is one way to solve the issue. You could obviously that works because you can use that SQL function, get the reverse of the string. I don't see any issue with that. My other approach would be to just use a mix of other string manipulation steps and probably some sort of loop to create the logic yourself to reverse that string in a flow.
Yeah.
In essence, yeah, you'd be creating a subflow that you could use as a step that reverses the string in the way that you want it to be reversed.
Yeah, I get it. Is there any way we can submit an FR to get a step like that? I mean, that's pretty basic to do in SQL. I was surprised that it wasn't there, because there are actually some pretty advanced string manipulation steps in there. You know what I mean? It seems like a lot of work to create a subflow just to reverse a string. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. And what I would suggest for getting a feature request submitted is because I think that's a valid request, and it probably would not be something that would be overly difficult to add to the product. Feature requests are generally submitted through a support ticket.
Yeah, I'll put a ticket in for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that should be a pretty simple one to get in. In the meantime, One other thing that you would, if you would want to take a look at, is let me open up a flow here. I agree. I think it might be a waste of your time to like create a flow that splits that string into characters and then reverses it. But one thing that can be useful and is sort of an advanced feature of decisions is if you go to integration and then .NET libraries, what you'll see is there's a lot of just .NET libraries that exist out of the box. One of these may have a function that would allow you to reverse a string.
Sure it does.
I don't know. What I would do is I would use Google first to see what like libraries have that sort of function, and then I would go and see if that's already included in this .NET libraries integration out of the box. And if it is, obviously you could just find that method in there and then use it.
How does this, can you expand on this a little bit? How does this work? Like, I get it. These are already like by default in decisions.
Correct. There's a pretty good handful of these libraries that just exist out of the box.
Okay. And so if you were to go into one of those and you like it's basically like pulling a step over, except you're like you said, you're using that method from that library.
Exactly. Let me try to see if I can find one that is familiar. But if you peruse through this step toolbox, you will get down to, you can see these are the classes, and then here's a method. If I drag it out, well, it is just acts as a step in decisions.
Nice. Okay. Huh. Okay.
So there may be some library in here, and I started looking at nVelocity here because I know that does a lot of text manipulation, but I don't think that there would be maybe in the utility. My normal, if I'm looking for a step in here, my first search is on Google generally, just to see, okay, where should I look?
Nice. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll give that a go.
But I still agree with you that I think under data and then text, there should be a reverse string step in there that is a native decision step.
Cool. All right. Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, David. Okay. If there is any other questions, of course, feel free to raise the hand, submit that question through the chat or the question and answer box. In the meantime, I don't see any hands raised or any questions in the question and answer. So I'm going to continue something that I've been doing on Lunch and Learns as just a demonstration of something that I think is kind of a fun project. Feel free at any point to interrupt what I'm doing so that you can ask your question, because that is more important to me than what I'm about to demonstrate. But what I've been working on is recreating this calculator in decisions. The idea came to me because one of the first tasks that I was assigned in decisions at the training effort when I first started here was to make a calculator using a form and a flow. And my calculator was very, very simple, and it was pretty ugly. and didn't have a whole lot of functionality to it. I wanted to take it a step further and just use this calculator, which I used to use back in elementary school, and try to recreate this over time in a form. So where I'm at with that currently is I have a very ugly form that I intend to make pretty later on. I'm going to go into my calculator project folder. And as a reminder to myself how this is currently working, because I haven't looked at this for a little bit, it looks like this. Okay, so I only have a 1 and a 2 button. I was using those to essentially prototype how I would want these buttons to operate. I had a few raise event buttons here to demonstrate how this would be able to trigger an active form flow. And then of course I've got my function button over here. This was a prototype for the plus button. What I've done with this, can I create the TI-83? Of course. Yeah, that's gonna be the next step. And I think that would be that would be a really fun challenge to tackle. I feel confident that there'd be a way to do something similar, but oh man. Even starting this project, this very simple calculator, there's a lot that goes on here. There's a single screen that has to display, you know, both what the user's typing in as well as the results of their calculations, and do it in an intuitive way. It's been kind of fun even just tackling this, but TI-83, that's definitely the next step. I'll have that done in 5 years, I think. What I was working on the last time was this addition sequence happy path. If I recall, what I got to was I think step number 4 in this sequence, which was the calculator clears the screen after a user presses an operation button. So if I recall how this calculator operates, when you hit plus, whatever you just typed in disappears and you're expected to type in the next number. Just so I can make sure I'm correct, I'm going to put in 1s and then hit plus. Okay, I had it replacing it with a 0, but I think that's an okay start. And that was because I wasn't able to pass in an empty string into this. I can figure that out later. I do know that in my active form flow, it's cached both the number that I typed in as well as the operator that I clicked. So if I had to put plus or if I put minus, it stored which button I actually clicked. So let me open up that calculator form and have a look at what I think I could do today. Okay, so I want to have the ability to type in the second number, and I'm going to start on the form flow for the equals button and see where I can get with that. If I don't have any questions come in, I will be ending this at 12:30 Eastern, so that'll be 15 minutes from now. So please, you know, if you have any questions, again, that's more important to me, and I will interrupt what I'm doing here. All right, so my active form flow for these, for the plus button, looks like this. I'm using the decisions cache steps to store off both the operator as well as the value that was typed in on that calculator. And then with the plus button, I'm just resetting that screen back to 0 so that the user can type something else. I'm going to duplicate this tab so that I can have that form open and test it in another tab. I want to see what happens right now if I hit plus and then if I type another character. Okay, it does have that 0 in front of it, and I want to fix that. That might be what I get to today. So it's a string. I'm setting it to a constant of 0. I think the issue was that if I had an empty string, this step says my value can't be null. So let me see if there's another step in my form rules toolbox here that just erases a control. So there's set control value, which is what I'm currently using. Clearing a validation. I don't want to just disable the control or enable it. Okay, not hiding or showing. I need to figure out why this is telling me it can't be null. But put in a single space. It's okay with that. Which means I could do that. It'll make the screen empty. At least let me test that. Yeah, so that looks good. There is a space in there, but I can always just trim that out in my other form flows. Okay, I'm okay with that for now. So I need to add an equals button. And that's just going to be a raise event button. I'm going to use this one that's already on the form. I don't think I need the rest of these right now. I'm just going to keep those off of the form and add them on once I have once I get to the point where I'm just adding the rest of my operator and number buttons. Refer back to this image here. Okay, so the equals button is taller, it's off to the right. I'm going to put it generally in that spot. My idea here is to get the functionality squared away first, and then come back and use, readjust the grid so that it matches this as closely as I can, and then use CSS to get some of these button styling on there and make it look as close to this as possible. But that'll come later. Like I said, I want to get these functionalities in here first. All right, so this is going to be, let me see what my naming scheme was. Okay. Equals, and then I'm going to put in brackets event. And the text is just going to show a big old equal sign. All right, so next thing to do, I'm going to add an active form flow that is going to run whenever I click the equals button. So I'm going to call that active form flow, of course, equals button, and the trigger is going to be when I click that button. And now to edit that flow. So the first thing I think I want to do is, based off of the sequence that I wrote out, I need to retrieve the operation that was clicked earlier from the cache, and I want to retrieve that number. So just like in my flow that is for the plus operator button, I'm going to use some cache steps. What I'd like to do, I'm going to duplicate this tab again. I want to have both of these active form flows open so I know they're going to interact heavily with one another. It's just going to be easier for me to be able to see them both at the same time. Let's see, I'm using the dependency browser to find that active form flow, plus button active form flow, and I can edit it from here. Cool. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is fetch that operator out of the cache. And I'm gonna use my get from cache step for that. Get operator from cache. The cache instance name is going to be the same one I used with my plus button. That was default memory cache, and that was the same as the type name. And my key, I just called the current operator. All right. So now I should be retrieving that value. It's going to just be a plus. And I'm going to copy this step so I can use that to get the value. And I probably called that current value, but just so I don't mess it up, I'm going to copy it from my operator flow. Oh, and before I forget, I want to rename this to be equals button form flow. All right, looking at my sequence, I've just retrieved the operation and the number. Oh, you know what? Okay, I totally skipped a step here in my sequence. It's a good thing I wrote this out. I should just read it more carefully. The next thing that actually needs to happen is the user enters a second number. Oh, you know what? I don't need to cache that. That is going to be the current value of the calculator screen, which means I can access that in this flow using a form rule step. I can get my current value. In fact, I don't even need to get that current value because as a part of my form flow, I have that form data and I have my calculator screen text box. So I can use that to get that current value. So then the next thing I really do need to do is perform that operation. My idea here for performing those operations is just to use the, there's a dynamic expression step. Evaluate dynamic expression. Let me make sure this is the right one. Okay, so this takes in an expression. Just as a quick test for myself, I'm going to just put this as the first step. I'm going to put in a constant. So something that I would expect that I'm putting together, it would be something like 1 plus 1, that simple. And I'm going to debug this just to make sure that this outputs the number 2 for this simple use case. Okay, the debugger is not working with me right now. Oops, I did not mean to close that form. I wonder if it's going to give me the opportunity to pick that existing flow or not. I don't think it is. Okay, so I have to build that again, but luckily that was really easy. No, the first thing I want to do before I actually do this, since I already closed that, is I want to save that form, close it, refresh this page, and see if I can get that debugger to show me if that step is the right one, in fact. Equals button, this is going to run when I click equals, wrong one, equals. All right, evaluate dynamic expression is the step I'm intending to use. And I was just going to put in a constant value here of 1 plus 1. and hit debug. Okay, it really doesn't want me to debug. It might be because that's an active form flow. So I'm just gonna, you know what? I have a do math flow here. I wonder if that's, okay. That's exactly what I've done in the past. This flow is already set up and this was to test it. Let me just see. Okay, cool. So that's the evaluate dynamic expression step. I must have done this at some point in the past and it does output too. So this is definitely the step I want to use. Now I just need to string it together so that I can take in those values from the cache and that current form screen. So cache steps. Get operator from cache. I think I still have I have that in my clipboard, so I'll put that in here. My cache name is default.memory cache, as well as my type name. And now I'm setting up the operator. Cool. All right, and I'm going to save this flow. All right, so I'm going to use a text merge to put together that expression that's going to be used with this expression step. I could just do a text merge directly on that step, but to me, I like to have that as a separate step, just so it's really clear if anybody else was going to come in. I think that's a little bit more maintainable. It's more clear like what's happening. So I'm going to do a plain text merge. I'm going to just type in merge. It's called merge to plain string. Call that step merge expression. And what am I going to do? I'm going to do value, which was the output of the cache step. So that first value that was typed in, then operator, and then from the form data, I have my calculator screen text box and whatever value was entered into there, or what the current value of that screen is. This should be my expression. I think best way to find out is to test it. So I'm going to call the output of that expression, and I'm going to pass that into my expression step, my dynamic expression step. And I'll call the output of this calculation result. In order to test this, since the debugger won't work here because I want the values to be passed in from the actual cache as well as the calculator screen, I'm going to just put the result of that expression step into my calculator screen using form rule step, and then test it in an actual flow. So what am I looking for? Set control. Set control value. I don't know why that took me so long to find it. Input is form data, and it's going to be my calculator screen because that's the control I want to change. And the value is going to be my calculation result. All right, save that. close this, and then this time I'm actually gonna hit OK so that it saves. Save my form and go to my tab where I was testing my calculator, and I'm gonna run the calculator form. I'm gonna run it in the debugger so I can keep an eye on what's happening with those cache steps just in case anything goes wrong. Run debug flow. All right, so I'm going to do the simple 1 plus 1. 1 plus 1, and then equals 2. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Just to look at what my rule flows were doing here. Okay, these are all my calculator screen things. Cache step was able to get the right value. Operation also got me the plus button. And then of course my dynamic expression step, the input to that was 1 plus 1. There's this kind of awkward space there. I noticed that, when I can't just clear that screen. So I might throw in like a trim string step just to get rid of that space. But luckily the dynamic expression step just worked through it and didn't really care about the space and output the number 2. So my happy path sequence here is complete. Now there's a ton of alternate paths, like maybe I'm going to type in another number instead of hitting equals, and I would have to consider all of that. But I'm pretty happy with getting this initial sequence done. I think that's a great stopping point for today. I was able to add 1 plus 1. It's not as easy as it sounds. Thanks everybody for listening in. I'm going to end the Lunch and Learn here today. I hope to see you on another Lunch and Learn in the future.